Daggerheart's latest expansion is here, and with it comes 4 new classes, a bunch of ancestries and communities, campaign frames, adversaries and environments, and so much more. But in this video, we will be focusing on one of the newest classes added to Daggerheart, which is their take on the Warlock. Starting with their class features, Patron's Pact and Favor. You have committed yourself to a supernatural entity, such as a god, fae, or demon, in exchange for power. Write their name on your character sheet, and then work with your GM to determine their sphere of influence, such as nature, chaos, wisdom, mischief, love, war, justice, or death, among many others. Before making an action roll that relates to your patron's sphere of influence, you can spend a favor to call upon their aid, rolling your patron die, and adding its result to the total. Your patron die starts at a d6, and increases to a d8 at level 5. Before we go over Patron's Pact, let's quickly read what Favor gives, since they are very closely tied. You start with 3 Favor. You can use a downtime move to show tribute to your patron, describe how you do so, and gain a favor equal to your spellcast trait. Additionally, when you succeed on an action roll with Hope, you can choose to gain a favor instead of a Hope. So with all of that, this is a very unique take on this archetype. With this version of the Warlock, even more so than its 5e counterpart, is incredibly customizable, since basically, with your GM, you create your own patron, giving it that Daggerheart spin, along with giving yourself some help with rolls that are related to your patron, which is very cool. Also specifically with Favor, I do really like the change that they made from the playtest. Since the original version, if you didn't take a downtime action to gain Favor, the GM would gain a fear, which as a concept is very cool to describe that give and take of a Warlock and their patron, but when put into practice, it punishes the player for playing a Warlock, since they now have to, in a sense, waste one of their downtime actions to prevent fear from growing. And also on top of that, sometimes the GM will just forget to get more fear, which in my own personal game with our own Warlock player, I have only remembered to do that once, maybe twice. Next, their Hope feature, Patron's Boon. When you fail a roll, you can spend 3 Hope to re-roll with advantage. A very simple but great feature for Warlock. Honestly, not much needs to be said. You get to re-roll with advantage. What's there not to love? Now we move on to subclasses, with Pact of the Endless and Pact of the Wrathful. Pact of the Endless is all about standing toe-to-toe against your enemies, and oddly for a Warlock, being the tank of the party. Which for their first Foundation feature, they get Patron's Mantle. Spend a favor to cloak yourself in a terrifying aspect of your patron, that lasts until you take severe damage or the scene ends. While this effect is active, you gain a bonus to your damage thresholds equal to your tier, and have advantage on action rolls to intimidate a target. So this feature, like I had mentioned, builds on the aspect of being the tank of the party, and giving a decent bonus to your damage thresholds, starting with a +1 and ending with a +4, which with armor, some domain cards, and leveling up, can create a nice cushion of health for the Warlock. Next they get Deathless Embrace. Once per rest, spend any number of favor to roll an equal number of patron die. For each result of 4 or higher, clear a hit point. This is pretty strong, giving the Warlock some self-sustain, since even starting at 3 favor, that's 3d6 from the start, which is a solid chance to heal at least 1 hit point. But since there's no limit on how much favor you can really have, you can really stack the odds in your favor. That pun was absolutely not intended. So overall, the Foundation features build a solid foundation. That one I meant. For this tanky Warlock. Now onto its specialization, starting with Harrowing Invocation. When an adversary targets you or an ally within very close range with an attack, you can spend a favor to give them disadvantage on the roll. If the adversary fails the roll, they must also mark a stress. This is a very solid ability to not only give a defensive tool for themselves, but also their allies, along with giving the chance to not only have the adversary fail the attack roll, but them also taking stress in return, which is a nice double whammy of a debuff against the adversary. Next up, they get Damage Sync. Once per rest, you can spend a favor to have incoming damage. Nothing much needs to be said, just continues to build into this tanky Warlock. Honestly, just overall a great defensive buff for them. For the first of their mastery features, they get Dark Aegis. Once per long rest, when you would take damage, you can spend a favor instead of marking hit points. Once again, a relatively simple feature that makes this Warlock the tank of the party. While granted it is only once per long rest, but for the ability to just straight up negate damage, it makes total sense as to why it would be a long rest ability. Lastly, they get Draining Bane, when an adversary targets you or an ally within very close range with an attack. You can spend a favor to drain them. When you do, they must mark a stress, and you clear a stress. While drained, the target uses a d12 instead of a d20 for attack rolls, including for advantage or disadvantage, until they fail a roll. So this is a very nice debuff to the enemy, since the first obvious thing is lowering their dice to a d12, which gives a higher chance of failure, along with marking them with stress while clearing your own. But the sneaky thing about this feature is that it completely negates crits from that adversary, since specifically in the book, it says that to get a critical success as a GM, you need to roll a 20 on a d20, which obviously is impossible to do on a d12. So, in turn, with this feature and the unlimited amount of favor to gain, you could completely deny that adversary of any crits, which is completely amazing. Now onto Pact of the Wrathful, which is all about being the best damage-dealing warlock around. Starting with its first foundation feature, Patron's Fury. Spend the favor to imbue your attacks with your patron's power until you deal severe damage, or the scene ends. When you roll damage, while this effect is active, you can also roll a number of patron die equal to your tier, adding their total to the damage dealt. So this feature is a pretty solid damage-dealing feature, giving you an extra d6 at tier 1, an upgrade at tier 3 with 3 d8s, and then gaining an extra d8 at the final tier, which is about an average of 3 damage at tier 1, 7 at tier 2, 13 at tier 3, and 18 at tier 4. So overall, solid extra damage that scales pretty well with each respective tier. Next, they get Deadly Vengeance. When you mark any hit points from an attack, you can spend a favor to roll an equal number of patron die. For each result of 4 or higher, the attacker marks a hit point. So with this feature, it gives the Warlock a massive damage boost, in the sense they have a high chance of damaging the enemy with 3d6. And, obviously similarly with the Endless version of this feature, can do untold amounts of damage, if the Warlock has a ton of favor to spend, possibly defeating the enemy without even attacking them themselves. For their specialization, they get Menacing Reach, and a favor to increase the range of your primary weapon by 1 step, such as melee to very close, or very close to close, to a maximum of very far range. This effect ends when you make a successful attack with that weapon. A pretty solid ability that can be useful if you're out of reach of an enemy, with no other options to attack them. Nothing too crazy, but can still be pretty useful. Next, they get Diminish My Foes. When you succeed with Hope on an action roll against a target, you can spend any number of favor to force the target to mark an equal number of stress. This ability is pretty strong, since on normal adversaries, it's pretty good to stress them out, since that will eventually damage them and get everyone advantage. But it's even stronger on those that rely on stress heavily for their abilities, since with this feature, you do everything I had said previously, but also completely deny them of some of their strongest features. For their mastery, they first get Fearsome Attack. Spend a favor to reroll any number of your damage dice. You can continue to spend favor to use this feature on the same damage roll. A very simple and good ability to just optimize your damage as best as you can, and if you have the favor to spend, you could guarantee a max damage roll. Lastly, they get Otherworldly Ire. Once per rest, when you take damage, you can spend any number of favor to roll that many patron die, and target a number of creatures within close range equal to the highest result. Each target must mark a hit point. A solid AoE ability that I personally don't think is as strong of a capstone as the Endless version, but still, a very good way to deal damage to a ton of enemies, with the max at this level being 8, which is definitely nothing to scoff at. So that is the Warlock in Daggerheart. A great interpretation, in my opinion, of this archetype, with some very cool and unique features, and 2 very distinct playstyles to experiment with Pact of the Endless being the most unique, with it being a tanky version of a Warlock that I haven't seen before in any system that has a Warlock or a similar class. But overall, Daggerheart's Warlock is a great addition to this system. If you enjoyed this video, why not leave a like and subscribe to keep up to date on all things Daggerheart. Bye for now.